Hello and welcome to the Learn English Football Podcast with your hosts, Tom and...
Tim. Hi, Tom. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks, Tim. How are you today?
Good. It's been another feast of football, Champions League football this week. Group stages are finished.
It has indeed. Yes, we've had the Champions League, we've had the Europa League, and we've had the Conference League, UEFA Conference League. So lots of things have happened. Teams have qualified, teams have failed, teams have dropped down into different tournaments and competitions. So we're going to discuss all of that, and we're going to start with the Champions League. So let's get straight into it. Tim, I understand that you've been following the Champions League and perhaps have even developed somewhat of a soft spot, a nice feeling towards your rivals Tottenham Hotspur.
Well, I wouldn't say a soft spot in public, definitely, and especially not when it's being recorded. But Group D was a real example of the romance of the Champions League. Going into the final day, all four teams could have won the group. All four teams could have come fourth in the group. All four teams could have gone to the Europa League. And not just going into the final day, going into the 90th minute. I mean, I was watching, supporting Marseille, of course. I was watching Marseille at home to Tottenham, a fabulous match. Marseille really dominated the first half. Could have scored more than one goal. And then Tottenham did the typical Tottenham performance. They didn't play well, but when they needed a goal, they started looking dangerous. And then in the 88th minute, an ex-Arsenal player rose at the back post, and it was only 2 meters out, and he missed a header that I think he would have scored 99 times out of 100. And as an ex-Arsenal fan, as you can see, that would have been my dream scenario. An ex-Arsenal.
Which Arsenal player are you referring to?
Kolasinac.
Mm-hmm.
There was quite a strong ex-Arsenal connection in the Marseille team. They had Alexis Sanchez up front, who was an ex-Arsenal striker. They had Matteo Guendouzi in midfield. They had Nuno Tavares, of course, on loan from Arsenal. And so there was a lot of connections, a lot of rivalry connections. So it was an exciting match. But not only did that game define results right up until the end, but also Eintracht Frankfurt played against Sporting Lisbon. Both those teams were capable of winning the group until the final minute. Tom, I have a question for you, and this is a moral question on a footballing morality or footballing ambition. So let me explain the situation to you. In the final minutes of the game, if Marseille had finished the game 1-1 against Tottenham, they would have qualified for the Europa League. But a draw was not enough for them to finish in the qualifying in the Champions League top two positions. And their manager didn't tell the players that a draw was enough to go to the Europa League. Their manager chose not to tell them, to make the players have more ambition and to go for the win, which I personally take my hat off. What would you do? What would you have done, Tom? Would you have played it safe and told your players that a draw was enough to continue some form of European football? Or would you have put all your eggs in one basket, which means to put all of your possibilities that depend on just one thing? Very dangerous. What would you have done, Tom?
I agree with the manager in this case, not only for the sake of motivating the players to give a professional performance, to try their hardest to win the game, also from the point of view of the club, from Marseille. I believe that there's a huge difference in the money that Marseille would receive if they had qualified for the Champions League as opposed to the Europa League knockout stages. So I'm sure that the president and the board of directors of the club would also want Marseille to try their hardest, although it does seem that in this case it backfired as they lost the game 2-1 with a late goal.
Backfire. I like that, Tom. When a plan backfires, it has the effect you want or completely the opposite effect?
The opposite effect. It comes from shooting a gun, and sometimes the gun might misfire and the bullet goes back towards the person holding the gun instead of out the proper end.
Yes, you certainly don't want to have a backfiring gun. And yet it does seem that their plan backfired because, of course, they will lose out on Champions League money, but they will also now lose out on Europa League money. But just to emphasize how tight this group was. Over the course of the 90 minutes, the group dynamics, the group positionings changed 7 times for the final time in the 90th minute. Tottenham at one point were playing Europa League football. Tottenham at some point, the 3 different points in the night, coming second in the group, and in the end they won the group. And as you say, Tom, when at the beginning you say a soft spot for them, I wouldn't go that far, but I can definitely understand the strong emotions that Tottenham fans must have been going through on Tuesday night, and I respect that emotion as a football fan.
I have to say, what you describe is exactly the kind of drama that we love in the late stages of a tournament. Tim, as we were both Almeria fans, watching closely on the last game of last season to see if Almeria could get promoted. They also had a three teams who could all finish first, second, or third. And it was incredibly exciting right down to the last moment. So it's not good for the heart. It's not good for keeping your calm in those situations. But from the point of view of excitement, it's unbeatable when a game finishes, or a whole match is like that with so many changes.
Certainly, and it definitely justifies the studying of maths as well. Right, let's move on then and talk about a different group, Group B. And inside Group B were my surprises of the Champions League so far, both for positive and, unfortunately, for negative reasons. Another side that I've got a soft spot for, a particular liking, is Atletico Madrid, or as they call them in Spain, Atleti. And they've had a terrible Champions League. They've gone out of the Champions League. They haven't even gone down to the Europa League. They won't be playing any Champions League football after Christmas for the first time in I won't say living memory, but memorable memory, definitely. And they finished on 5 points. And you look at the group, and it's not even that difficult on paper. You've got Porto, Club Brugge, Bayer Leverkusen, and Atletico Madrid. Now, Atletico Madrid should be winning that group, or at least coming second, definitely not coming fourth. So I've been thinking about it, and I think there are some problems with Atletico Madrid. I think they're at a turning point. They need to make changes, or big changes, wholesale changes. Wholesale changes are drastic changes, or accept the kind of club they are. Who are content being a third in the league, fourth in the league, playing functional football, not beautiful football. Because the problem Atletico have at the moment, for me, is they've sacrificed what made them successful, that workmanlike industrial football, to try and bring in some more creative players like Joao
Felix.
Joao Felix, yes. Of course, they brought back Griezmann after his time in semi-retirement at Barcelona. And of course, they've got these clashes of styles. Of course, they lost a lot of their pillars in the defense last summer. But really, the club need to back Simeone, let him buy the players that he wants, or they need to say, okay, we're going to pay you off, Simeone, and he would cost a lot to pay off. Apparently, it would cost him over 35 million euros to pay him off. He's got a very long-term contract. And invest in a new style of football. But at the same time, defending Simeone's style of football and his results, he's spending under budget. Atletico Madrid are earning more money from television, from seats, from all sponsorships than they're allowed to spend. In fact, he's spending less money than a lot of the Premier League clubs in the bottom half of the Premier League. They have a comparable budget to Crystal Palace. Now, you wouldn't expect Crystal Palace to qualify for the knockout stages of the Champions League. And also, let's be careful what we wish for, which is a nice expression to mean... yeah, it is what it is. Let's be careful what you wish for. Try not to want things that, in fact, might create a worse situation for yourself. They might backfire. And let's not forget that this is probably the most successful period of Atletico Madrid's history since the 1940s. So Diego Simeone has elevated the club. Let's not forget that in the early 2000s, they got relegated. And also, look at Valencia. I understand if you're a big Spanish club and you're not Barcelona or Real Madrid, you get to this point where you're consistently third in the league, maybe sometimes second, even in Atleti's case, sometimes once or twice winning the league. There's a huge amount of pressure to take the next step up. But sometimes we need to also consider that the risks of taking that next step up could leave us in a club like Valencia, who 15 years ago were the third best club in Spain. They were getting to Champions League finals. They had a workman-like manager in Rafael Benitez, and finally they wanted to change direction. Where are they now? They're in footballing wilderness. If I'm in the wilderness, Tom, where am I?
You're in the middle of nowhere.
I'm lost.
You're lost. That's right. Yes, wilderness is a nice synonym, a bit like the wild, but it's just a sense of being out in nature, but surrounded by nothing. And in this context, you're right. You mean lost.
Yes. So I do think it's a difficult moment for Atletico Madrid. They need some strong decision making. Tom, what would you do if you were the Atletico Madrid owners? Would you back Simeone and accept a not the most attractive style of football? Or would you think he's taken us as far as he can? It's time to change direction.
It would be an extremely difficult decision if I was an owner of the football club Athletic Club Madrid, Atleti. The reason is that Diego Simeone has punched above his weight for many years. By punched above his weight, this term comes from boxing. It means he has overachieved. He has exceeded the expectations for a club of that size and with the players they've got. There has been a trade-off, though. In order to overachieve, they've had to compromise on the style of football. And as we know, this club under Simeone have played a very compact defensive style, which typically means that they would just score many goals on the counter-attack and just score and win a game by one. But they were so organized in defense with a hard-working midfield in front that it didn't matter. One goal was usually enough to win the games. That has worked for a long time for them. But like everything in football, you need to be able to change. You need to be able to evolve. Sometimes that's the players in the dressing room, and sometimes that is the manager. So I wonder if now, if I were the president of the club, I'd be thinking, El Cholo, Simeone has taken the club very far. He's been a fantastic servant, but maybe it is time for someone else to come. The benefit of bringing a fresh face in, perhaps a manager who can play more attacking football, is that you can then attract more attacking quality. You have to consider that these players you've mentioned, like your Joao Felixes, Griezmann, Suarez, Morata, it's incredible that they have come back to the club because they're never going to score lots of goals at Atletico Madrid. They're never going to be the top scorer, the top assist maker, because that's not the style of football that Atletico Madrid play. If they bring in a new manager, perhaps they can reinvent themselves as more of an attacking team again. So I'd be tempted to, as we say, a Las Vegas expression here, to roll the dice, to take a gamble and bring in someone else now.
To take a gamble, yeah. I think there are a couple of worrying signs for Simeone. One is that apparently the fans are more vocal in their criticism of him than previously. And secondly, apparently there are questions starting to be asked inside the dressing room. People are bored of the same voices, and that's always worrying. Another question for you, Tom. I looked at Group C, and I saw Barcelona, Inter Milan, and Bayern Munich. And I thought, wow, this is going to be a difficult group. This is going to be the group of death. And I think everyone decided that Bayern Munich were going to win the group. And there was a challenge between Barcelona and Inter Milan for second place. But that challenge failed to materialize from Barcelona. They had a terrible Champions League. What is this, Tom? Is this a Barcelona in crisis because they've gone down to the Europa League? Or is it quite normal that a team in transition, making so many signings over the summer, finds it difficult to qualify from what is objectively a very difficult Champions League group? Is it the problem? Is it the team that's in crisis, or is it the expectations of the fans and the club which creates a crisis where one doesn't really exist?
I tend to side with your second argument. The expectations were perhaps too high in consideration of the group they found themselves in, with Bayern Munich, with Inter Milan. These are two very, very high quality teams at the moment, with world-class players throughout their squads in every part of the field. So Barcelona, the name, the reputation makes people think Barcelona deserve, they should automatically qualify. But actually, when you look at the squads of the different teams, perhaps third place is correct for Barcelona. You mentioned earlier that there is a sense of transition with the squad. We have some very old players and some very young players. I'm thinking, of course, like PK, although you mentioned, I think you told me just now off air that he's retired. He must be 35 or 36. But then we've got Jordi Alba, Sergio Busquets, and then we've got some very young players, of course, like Gabi and Pedri, and some very young attacking players. So they perhaps could do with more players who are not at the extremes of their career, but more in that kind of mid to late 20s or around 30 to make this Barcelona team more balanced in terms of experience.
I think we should take a second to mention Gerard Piqué, of course, just retired yesterday, an emotional video released on his social networks. And take a second to, I mean, he's not a universally liked person here in Spain, partly because of his political views, partly because of his business ambition. But as a football player, I think he has contributed massively to the modern game. I was listening to a podcast yesterday with an Italian commentator who said, oh, of course, you can't compare Piqué to Baresi. And I heard that and I thought, hang on a second, what are they basing that on? Because I don't remember Baresi bringing the ball out of defence, playing 70-yard cross-field balls, having absorbed pressure, turned away from pressure and known where his teammates are. So I think we need to give Piqué some credit for what he has done.
Yes, I'd just like to interrupt there as well. Baresi, fantastic defender as he was, does he have the same amount of silverware as Piqué? Piqué is a multiple Champions League winner.
Piqué, I've got the list here.
Tell me.
He's won La Liga 8 times. He's won the Copa del Rey 7 times. He's won the Spanish Super Cup 6 times. He's won the Champions League 3 times. He's won the UEFA Super Cup 3 times. He's won the FIFA Club World Cup 3 times. He's won the World Cup and he's won the European Cup. So he's not done badly.
It would be hard to find many players. Of course, you can argue, there is an argument to say that he peaked in his career at a perfect time, just as Spanish football, national football, was on the ascent. But at the same time, you'd be hard pushed to find 5 players who have achieved and won more trophies than him in the modern game.
Yeah, well, and that's the secret there, the modern game, because I heard an interview yesterday with Victor Valdés, the goalkeeper at Barcelona, when Piqué was coming through. And apparently when Guardiola arrived, Valdés was under strict instructions not to kick the ball long, to play it to defenders like Piqué and Puyol. And Valdés said, no, I can't do that. They'll lose the ball and we'll be in danger. And Piqué said, don't worry, you give me the ball. I'll attract players. That will create space somewhere else. I'll find that space with a great long pass. And essentially it allowed his technical equality on the ball, extended Puyol's career because Puyol didn't have to modernize so much in terms of his passing ability or his technical ability or his vision of the game. He was able to focus really on being a traditional centre-back. So I think the perceptions of Piqué I think he's undervalued, underrated. I really think he's been one of the top players in his position over the last 15 years. Anyway, just a quick comment before we finish on the Champions League. A quick shout out to Glasgow Rangers fans, having just had the worst Champions League group stage in the history of the Champions League. They got 0 points and a goal difference. Is it minus 19 or minus 20?
20. 2 goals for, 22 goals against.
Yes, so on the final day, they beat the record for the worst Champions League group stage ever, because the previous one was a record of minus 19 goals. So fair play to Rangers. Unlucky, but hope they do better I hope they do better next year. Tom, that's the Champions League done, but there are some tasty looking matches coming up in the Europa League. So when I say something looks tasty or sounds tasty, it means it sounds appetizing. It sounds attractive. So let me explain
more expressions for our listeners. It sounds mouth-watering.
It certainly does.
Prospect. It's salivating. It makes you produce saliva. Yes.
Yes. So the format in the Europa League has changed this season. Now teams that come second in the Europa League group play a knockout round against the teams which come down from the Champions League group, which who have come third in their group. Now, this is an extra 2 games. So if you came first in your Europa League group, you don't play these 2 games. But just to give you an example of some of the bigger teams that have come second in the Europa League groups, we've got Manchester United, we've got Monaco, we've got PSV, we've got Roma under Jose Mourinho. And then some teams coming down from the Champions League. We've got Ajax, of course, finalists recently, Barcelona, giants of European football, Juventus, juggernauts of European football. A giant and a juggernaut of a sector is very similar. Leverkusen, Sevilla, who of course have got a rich European history. Shakhtar Donetsk, who started very strongly in spite of playing in Poland, got some good players. And then Sporting Lisbon. So, I mean, you could have some really heavyweight European ties there. You could have Manchester United against Juventus. You could have Monaco against Sevilla. So I'm tempted to say that this might be the most exciting Europa League knockout stage I've ever seen. Well, hopefully. We haven't seen the draw yet, but it should be really exciting. Tom, do you think generally the Europa League and the Conference League are becoming more interesting? Do you think because the quality is being more, the big teams, more big teams are dropping down, do you think essentially the Europa League's become more important?
I think so now. I think that UEFA have been playing with the format over a good 10 or 20 years now, tweaking, making little changes. And right now, I think they found a format that works well because those teams you mentioned who are coming down from the Champions League from finishing third in their groups to play the group runner-ups from the Europa League is going to create some very interesting battles that are not necessarily easy to predict. You take, for example, Manchester United. If Manchester United were to draw a big team like a Juventus or a Barcelona, it would be very hard to say which team will come out on top. So I think that is a very, very good thing, that probably the third place teams in the Champions League will come in at a level where the games are competitive against the runners-up in the Europa League. I think for that reason, of course, the early stages of the group stages, the first 6 games can be a bit dull, can look a bit boring. Sometimes you're looking in these empty stadiums when a player scores a goal and all the seats are empty. That's not so inspiring. But when we get to the business end stage of the football, the knockout rounds, yes, I think that we could be in for some increasingly exciting games in the Europa League. You also asked about the Conference League. I was interested in the Conference League I watched the final against Feyenoord against Roma. And of course, this season we've got West Ham. My team are in the Conference League. So I'm curious to see what teams will come down from the Europa League and play against teams from the Conference League. And that is interesting for me as well. So yes, I like this new format.
Yeah, I think the Champions League draw as well could throw up some interesting matches purely because there were some surprising results in the groups. So, for example, Paris Saint-Germain, in dramatic fashion, finished second in their group with Benfica winning the group, winning 5 or 6-1 away in Tel Aviv to overtake Paris Saint-Germain on goal difference on the last day. So that means Paris Saint-Germain are going to play either Napoli, Porto, Bayern Munich, Tottenham, Chelsea, Real Madrid or Manchester City. So there suddenly we're going to have a big European club fail at the next stage. We've also got teams like Liverpool finished second in their group, Dortmund finished second in their group, Inter finished second in their group, Milan finished second in their group. So any of those could play against the clubs, obviously not from the same country or from their own group, but against first place club group winners. So I think this draw, I think it's on Monday, is going to be very exciting and it's going to give us a lot of football to look forward to. The one thing is, though, there is a lot of football to be played between now and those groups and those knockout matches. So I think making any predictions doesn't really make too much sense. We've got a World Cup and then we've got a January transfer window and we've got such congested football that there will be injuries.
Absolutely, yes. We will resist making predictions. I was thinking back to our episode back at the beginning of this Champions League, Tim, and thinking how accurate were we with our predictions for the Champions League final results. And I think, with the exceptions of Club Bruges, who have finished above Atletico to qualify, and I don't remember if you put Barcelona above Inter. I think I might have done to finish second in that group. But that's
Well,
apart from those ones. I think we got our predictions generally correct. There were not too many surprises.
good. That means we must know what we're talking about. Tom, a final question before we finish. Going back to something which affected most football fans very deeply was a suggestion of a breakaway league a couple of years ago, the European Super League. 16 European clubs, the richest 16 European clubs, got together and decided they were going to try and break away from the traditional domestic football pyramid. Now, the question here is, if we look at the 16 clubs that tried to break away, 5 of them haven't qualified for the knockout stages of the Champions League. So, let me try and test my memory. We haven't got Arsenal. We haven't got Manchester United. We haven't got... Oh, who else haven't we got?
Juventus.
We haven't got Juventus, of course. We haven't got Barcelona. And there's one more as well.
Would it be Atletico Madrid, maybe?
And Atletico Madrid, of course. So now, on one hand, you could argue that makes the case for the Super League less strong, because it shows that there aren't 16 clubs, the biggest 16 clubs that are always there at the top of European football. And maybe for sporting reasons, it really weakens the argument for the Super League. But I was reading a report yesterday saying that actually the Barcelona directors and the Juventus directors are going to double down on their efforts to push for the Super League now, because they're actually having to face the consequences of losing Champions League money. The difference between Champions League and Europa League is £20 million. So Barcelona have got a £20 million hole in their finances, and so have Juventus. So you can just imagine what the Barcelona delegates will be doing, trying to get in contact with other clubs, trying to say, look, why are you putting your finances at risk? Why don't you come and join the Super League? Let's not forget that the 3 clubs who have still not abandoned the Super League idea officially are Real Madrid, Barcelona, and Juventus. So 2 of those 3 clubs that haven't given up on the idea are directly affected. So, Tom, do you reckon this is going to make the European Super League more likely or less likely?
I think the point you made there, you are absolutely correct, that it weakens the case for a European Super League. If you've got 16 clubs who would be permanently there, or maybe with some kind of relegation process for a couple of them, but only 11 of those proposed clubs have qualified for the final stages, then it shows that there is a fluidity in football that's related to momentum and form, going up, going down over a period of years or even decades sometimes. So we are discounting that natural momentum that gives the opportunity for underdog teams like Leicester City to win a league, or the rise of the Red Bull Leipzig and Salzburg teams to come up and show that they can compete with the best. So for that reason, for the fairy tale of the small team rising up to the top, you can say that the argument for a Super League is very weak, especially when 5 of those proposed teams haven't made it. I want to raise one other point about the Super League, though. It is curious how it has popped up into the conversation again, not long after we were discussing it, and it was dismissed just a couple of years ago for being rejected resoundingly by the fans, who really made their message very, very clear to a number of clubs that they would not accept it. They would not tolerate the club taking them out of their national league. So the idea that it has come back again makes me think that it's not going to go away. They're going to keep on putting it out there, testing the water, trying to make it sound more acceptable. And one other argument I've heard, which I don't believe personally, but which I have heard a lot, is now football is too unbalanced because too much money is flowing into the British Premier League game, enabling British clubs. You mentioned Crystal Palace with the same budget as Atletico Madrid. That's a reflection of the imbalance in European football now. This, of course, is a reflection of television rights, the fact that more fans around the world want to spend money to watch English football. So there is an argument in Europe that we need to redress that balance to make it more competitive for the European top flight teams. Personally, I don't buy this argument. I think that, again, it's just clubs looking for a way to consolidate or grow their wealth. And these clubs will pretend they care about the smaller clubs around them, but in reality, they're moving to break away. They're moving to distance themselves from the smaller teams in their own league, which is going to be worse for the majority of fans who don't support one of these giant clubs.
Yeah, well, I think you're right. They will keep on pushing for it, especially behind closed doors, and it is back in the news because, of course, it's in the European Court of Court of Arbitration for Sport. Sorry, CAS. Because I can't remember which one of the three clubs, or was it they did it together. They tried to sue UEFA for saying that they weren't able to practice business freely, because UEFA said that they would sue them if they abandoned the competitions that they were signed up for. So essentially, it's going to come down to a legal battle, not a battle of what fans want, what's best for the game, what's best for fair competition. So it's a shame that it is like that. It's a shame that it is like that.
Yes, let's just say I'm very skeptical about arguments like we're going to make things even, we're going to make things fairer, because the people who are pushing these arguments are typically the managers, the owners of very, very big, powerful clubs in their own domestic divisions.
Yeah, exactly.
I wouldn't be surprised if we hear this argument more and more.
When the same people who have facilitated the total monopoly of Real Madrid and Barcelona are going to UEFA and saying that that English football has too much money, then you know that their motives are not pure. Tom, you have been making some fantastic videos on TikTok this week, and I must say I've loved every single one of them. For some of our listeners who don't know, we have set up a TikTok page if they want some quick, short videos to learn some nice vocabulary, some different vocabulary, some vocabulary that you don't often find in books. What's the page, Tom? How can they find us on TikTok?
They can find us under the title of our channel, Learn English Football Podcast. Our handle there is LEFPOD, LEFPOD. So you can type in LEFPOD and you should find us coming up there as well. I should say as well, though, Tim, I've not stopped at TikTok. I have also expanded us onto YouTube, and YouTube, of course, have a YouTube Shorts format, which is suitable for the kind of video content we're making. So again, Learn English Football Podcast. You can find our channel on YouTube, and I'm copying our TikTok videos over to there. And I was also going to ask you, Tim, off the air, but I will ask you now as it's come up.
No pressure.
What about Instagram? Why don't we do Instagram?
Instagram? You mean, well, like the kids, like the young people, like us? Well, there's no good reason why not. If our listeners want it, if our listeners are looking to learn English on Instagram, then who are we to stand in their way, Tom?
Okay.
Exactly.
Well, that was going to be my suggestion for you, to get our channel open on there.
Okay. Well, we'll get on it. Tom, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the Learn English Football Podcast. I hope all of our listeners have enjoyed the episode, are speaking football as often as possible. They know all of our episodes come out either Thursday or Friday, most week or every week. And yes, get watching football, watch as much as possible, think about it, dream about it, speak about it.
That's right. And of course, share us with your friends who might also enjoy listening to us.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.